Okay, are we ready to go? Good evening, everyone. I'm waiting for Andrea and Michael to come on.
Hello.
Hi, welcome. Okay, so I want to warmly welcome everyone to our program this evening. It's a special collaborative event between the Sinai Temple Men's Club and the Sinai Temple Mental Health Center. My name is Carolyn Hoffman. I am a licensed clinical social worker and the director of the Mental Health Center. We'll be hearing in a minute from Michael Silberstein, who is the president of the Men's Club. Tonight, we're going to be hearing from Andrea Sonnenberg. Welcome, Andrea. And she'll be sharing with us her journey, navigating through mental health challenges as the mother of her dear son, Bradley, before and after his tragic death at the age of 21 from a mixing of psychiatric medications. Many of you are with us on Zoom, and we welcome you. And we are also live on YouTube and on the Sinai Temple Facebook channel. So you know tonight's event is being recorded, and you can return to view it online in the future. So a very quick word about the Mental Health Center. We launched in July of 2021. We were made possible and are made possible by a generous grant from the Frederick D. Rosen and Nadine Schiff Rosen Family Foundation. The establishment of the center speaks to Sinai Temple's commitment to the understanding that our emotional life is essential to what makes us human, to our communal responsibility to respond compassionately when we are faced with challenges, and to promote practices that support positive mental health throughout our lifetimes. Our hope is to open the conversation around the importance of mental health and move towards destigmatizing mental health struggles. The Mental Health Center is a visible and accessible professional resource to all Sinai Temple members, staff, board, and clergy. In addition to community programming like this, I offer a variety of support groups, in addition, as well as consultation, information, and referrals around a full range of mental health concerns to individuals, couples, and families. We also provide mental health support to the Sinai Temple Religious School and to Sinai Akiba Academy. That's me and the Sinai Temple Mental Health Center in a nutshell. I'd like to introduce Michael Silberstein, who is the president of our Men's Club, and to do a warm welcome to the members of the club and to all others who are participating in tonight's program. Michael? See there?
Okay, here we go.
Okay.
Good. Thank you so much, Carolyn. Good
Sure.
evening to everybody. I'm looking forward to partnering tonight with Carolyn on this fantastic program about mental health. I think it's something that we all know someone that in our family and our friends who would benefit from this type of information. So glad you're joining us tonight or listening to this recording. For those folks who are not familiar with the Men's Club, the Men's Club is actually a long-term group of both men and women at Sinai Temple who join monthly for different types of lectures, very serious topics, very light topics. For the last few months, we've focused on the humor in TV sitcoms and movies, and how basically any character that you hear about in a TV sitcom has a Jewish root to it. But we do programs each and every month. We hope to resume these programs in person. And I want to invite you, if you've never participated with the Sinai Temple Men's Club, please come in. As I say, topics go from lighthearted to very heavy topics, health related, current events. And by the way, just to put on your radar, number one, this Shabbat, the men's club is having and running the services in the main sanctuary at Sinai Temple. So we invite you to join. And if you'd like to be part of the service, we'll find a role for you. I also want to let you know that we're planning an outdoor event with the comedian Elon Gold. And that will be an event, as I say, at one of the members' homes. It'll be a wonderful afternoon to see people without masks, to see their smiles, and to build community, because the men's club is committed to lots of education and Jewish values, as well as building our community even stronger that each and every day. So with that being said, I'll return it back to Carolyn, and I'm glad everyone is joining tonight, and looks forward to join future meetings, as they are the first Tuesday of each month. So Carolyn, I'm looking forward to tonight's discussion. It's wonderful to partner along with you and make this event happen.
Here I am. I was muted. Thank you, Michael, for those words and for welcome. I feel the same way. So without further ado, I would like to officially and warmly welcome Andrea Sonnenberg to our family, to our presentation tonight. I'd like to introduce her. She is an attorney who has practiced in the corporate, entertainment, and nonprofit sectors. She is co-founder, CEO, and board chair of Wise Readers to Leaders, a nonprofit literary and enrichment program for underserved students in Los Angeles. She is the board chair of UCLA, you know where my allegiance is, USC Hillel, serves on the board of the Jewish Community Foundation, and is co-chair of the legal network of the Jewish Federation of Greater Los Angeles. Inspired by her son's untimely death, Andrea has become a mental health advocate, working to educate, increase awareness, and influence policy and decision makers through public speaking and open communication and conversation. She and her husband have created the Bradley Sonnenburg Wellness Initiative at USC Hillel, which offers individual therapy, peer-to-peer support, and wellness programming, along with the creation of a mental health curriculum for replication on college campuses across the country. She created and coordinates the Bradley Sonnenburg Wellness Series at Stephen Weiss Temple, committed to strengthening the wellness of the broader community. Andrea produces the podcast Getting Thru, which shares stories of young people's resilience despite mental health challenges. To honor her son, who was a talented singer, she sings for her temple community or anywhere else that people will listen to spread joy through his legacy. Andrea, thank you very much for joining us tonight and for sharing your story.
Thank you. It is such a pleasure and an honor to be here. It's so incredible what your synagogue is doing in terms of recognizing the importance and the need for services to support our whole self, our emotional and social and physical self. So mazel tov and that's wonderful. So I'm going to get started. I am going to share my screen. Okay, and I am going to cover myself so that you can just concentrate on the slides, and then I will come back at the end for the Q&A. So thank you. I'm going to tell you two stories. The first is a tragedy that ends as most tragedies do, in the death of the protagonist. And the second is a story of survival that is a hopeful ending, although it will evoke tears, frustration, and disappointment along the way. The tragedy I'm sharing today is the story of my youngest son, Bradley, who died at the age of 21. In 2017, while my husband Glenn and I were celebrating at a Hanukkah party, we got the call that changed our lives forever. Bradley had passed away. It was unfathomable. When a young person dies unexpectedly, most people assume accident, suicide, or drug overdose. In Bradley's case, as in much of his life, the cause was far more complex. In a world where we want answers, there were none. In order to go on, I knew that I desperately needed Bradley's death to have meaning and become a rallying cry for change. So I'm speaking out, telling the story of one young man that is representative of thousands like him. In telling his story, there are lessons to learn about how to recognize, deal with, and find comfort living with mental illness. And the story of survival is mine, and it's peppered with renewal and hope. People talk of the COVID-19 crisis as a pandemic of historic proportions, and it is, but there's another pandemic, one that began a long time ago and likely will be with us for a long time to come. It won't mutate away or be controlled by vaccines. It's the pandemic of mental illness, an ailment that is affecting the entire globe in crisis proportions. 1 in 4 of us struggle with it. Over half of all college students self-report suffering, and yet people still don't talk openly about mental illness. I'm a perfect example. It has taken me 3 years since the loss of my son to find the courage to share our family story. Let me start by telling you a bit about Bradley. He was quirky, but so beloved by Glenn and me, his big brother Jake, and his twin sister Lauren. Bradley was often happy, seemingly like other kids, but he frequently felt uncomfortable in his own skin. Transitions were hard for him. In fact, everything was hard for him. We had a saying in the family, it's hard to be Bradley. I searched for answers, but it became clear that we needed help. Bradley was always so tough on himself. Nothing was ever good enough. He was patient and understanding of others, but a perfectionist in his own performance. If something didn't go exactly as planned, he had a hard time adapting. He often didn't fit in. It was so stressful when I dropped him off at a play date. If he misbehaved, instead of being sympathetic, I was embarrassed. In retrospect, I wish I hadn't made it about me and instead focused on him. There is no reason to be ashamed. We learned that Bradley's differences, his pain and sensitivities meant he was a deep and caring soul. He noticed beauty in the world, from the tiniest of Earth's creatures to the sound of the rain. He loved comic books, candy, and Disneyland. He was such a character, but there were difficulties. Doctors suggested all sorts of possible treatments, some of which we pursued. We really just hoped he would outgrow his issues. Around this time, we steered Bradley towards musical theater. He sang like an angel and took to the stage like a natural. He began to star on musicals, fell in love with reading, and learned to play the piano. He seemed at peace and started to shine, getting A's and participating in school activities with other kids, but he really wasn't fine. He started keeping kosher, and since we weren't Orthodox, it didn't make any sense. His lunches started coming home exactly as I had sent them. We came to understand that restricting his diet was his way of controlling his world. During a family trip to Germany, when we went to Subway, Bradley's favorite restaurant, he refused to eat. We thought maybe it was just the food in Europe, but later learned it was an eating disorder, anorexia, one of the most emotionally devastating illnesses that impacts the entire family. We had a hunch that our other children might also be suffering, and we later learned that the unaffected sibling is an actual condition. Putting a name to Lauren's and Jake's feelings of neglect, stigma, and guilt helped us be better parents to them. When Bradley stopped eating completely, his psychiatrist insisted that he be admitted as an inpatient at a renowned eating disorder clinic, where he remained for 7 weeks. It was terrifying to put our 11-year-old son in a psychiatric hospital with mostly older and female patients. The doctor said he could die otherwise. We came to the hospital every day, bringing games to play, and even Coco, whom Bradley adored. But our visits were restricted to the public area. We were not allowed to visit his room or tuck him in at night. There were issues with the program, but Bradley did gain some weight, so we considered it a partial success. We didn't tell anyone about Bradley's hospitalization, so he wouldn't be labeled as mentally ill. It didn't seem fair for the diagnosis to follow him for the rest of his life. I was guilty myself of perpetuating the stigma since I wasn't willing to share our story. Suffering in silence exacerbates the pain and sense of isolation. And this brings me to my first insight that I want to share with you today. Don't suffer in silence. Reach out to someone to get help for yourself, or if you are assisting someone else with a mental health issue. You'll be surprised to learn how many others are similarly struggling, and you'll feel so much better when you realize you aren't alone. We were so lucky Bradley had maintained his friendship with his friend Jordan, the one person we told, and he visited regularly. Without this amazing 11-year-old boy who stood by our son, Bradley would have lost all hope. Transitioning back to school for 6th grade after the hospital was difficult. Bradley struggled to regulate his behavior, unable to follow instructions or abide by the rules. There were incidents of dangerous behavior. He was egged on by other boys to climb on the school roof and jump. Because he was so desperate to be included, he didn't see it as bullying and dived off. Fortunately, he wasn't hurt. He then found liquid mercury online and was mesmerized. Unaware of its dangers, he brought it to school and to his psychiatrist's office. Every time the phone rang, I was terrified. Someone was calling to complain about something outrageous he had done. At that point, his doctors implored us to send him to a therapeutic boarding school. I couldn't bear this, so I called the psychiatrist, begging for Bradley to be seen every day so he could continue living at home. I was told his safety couldn't be assured any other way. I desperately sought out a second opinion that would let me keep him home, but no such luck. Parents worked to have him removed from school so he wouldn't have to be around their children. Instead of coming to us with their concerns, our friends complained to the administration. When a child has a physical illness, everyone bakes cakes and brings casseroles. With mental illness, there are only whispers and silence. I wish people had reached out to check in on me so I wouldn't have felt so alone. And this brings me to my second insight. Even if it seems a little scary, be there for your loved ones and friends who are suffering. Research has now shown that even one phone conversation provides significant impact on someone's mental health, offering a major mood boost and completely shifting the course of their thinking. Your support can make all the difference in the world. Glenn came to the conclusion that Bradley needed to be in a therapeutic living situation before I could bear that. The thought of Bradley living away from his family was unimaginable. I was not ready to say goodbye to my baby boy. But that Christmas, during a family trip, we realized there was no longer a choice. Against our strict instructions, Bradley swam out too far in the ocean and we lost sight of him. Glenn made a mad dash into the water to save our son. And if it weren't for my husband and the paramedics, he would have died that day. We spent the next several days in intensive care. It became clear that I couldn't keep Bradley safe. So we presented him the option of a therapeutic boarding school in Colorado. Bradley felt out of control and realized he needed help. So he agreed to spend the next 2 years there. It gave me peace of mind to know that my son was finally safe. Often these boarding schools can be terrible. We were so lucky to find one that was palatable to him and saved his life. Using a technique known as a milieu environment with an emphasis on outdoor activities, they resolved his relationship with food, taught him to understand natural consequences, and most importantly, believe in himself and his ability to succeed. Our family visits were such happy times. It was transformational for Bradley to be in an environment where mental illness was not stigmatized. He excelled in his classes and made friends with similar struggles. He studied for his bar mitzvah, and we took a trip to Israel for the ceremony. When he returned home, he seemed like a completely different kid, happy, loving, grateful. A year later, he accepted an invitation to participate on a panel of successful alumni at Parent Weekend. We considered this to be a victory. I had a feeling of euphoria because I naively believed that he was cured. Glenn had a deeper and more intuitive understanding that Bradley had a chronic condition that would always need managing. I wasn't willing to accept that. And this brings me to my third insight. Mental and physical health are inextricably linked and equally important. We need to treat mental illness the same way that we do a physical illness, offering the same energy and resources, as well as sympathy and understanding for someone suffering from depression, as someone suffering from a serious physical illness like diabetes. There is no judgment or shame in suffering from a mental health issue. Bradley's transition back to life at home went smoothly. For 8th grade, we enrolled him at a school for twice exceptional learners, students with a combination of special abilities and disabilities. For high school, he wanted to try a mainstream school, and we wanted him to have that experience. So off to D. Toledo High School, where he flourished in every way, hanging out with friends and attending both proms. He starred in all the musicals, playing Seymour in Little Shop of Horrors and Mark and Rent. He didn't just play a character, he inhabited researching and purchasing the perfect prop for each show. An old-fashioned movie camera for Mark and cockeyed glasses for Seymour. He was considering a career in musical theater. He started taking dance lessons so he could become a triple threat, and even had headshots taken. He was a libertarian, suspicious of the government and its overreaching control. He used his savings to purchase a Bitcoin long before its exponential rise in value. Our funny, silly, and irreverent Bradley was at his peak. He loved modern art. Rothko was a favorite, and he insisted that it be viewed from the proper distance with hands cupped around the eyes to better live the life of the painting. His love of books continued. Reading was his comfort and his compass. Once, when reading a Franz Kafka book and asked what he was doing, he replied, "I'm getting my Kafka on." He loved science fiction, dystopian novels, and books with deep philosophical meaning. Bradley and I shared a passion for reading, which led me to start Wise Readers to Leaders, a literacy program for underserved students. Bradley was proud of this work and actively participated as a volunteer. Over the years, we've provided thousands of students with literacy support inspired by Bradley's belief in the power of reading. This photo was sent to me by one of Bradley's friends, who still honors his memory by keeping his favorite books on our night table. Photos can tell you a story, but they also can be deceiving. They demonstrate how a mental health disorder can often be an invisible illness. Here, Bradley looks like he was doing great, but there were still so many issues. Despite his outward appearance, he was often anxious before going off to meet friends. While he shined in the escape of performance, it was the real world without a script that was daunting. Towards the end of Bradley's junior year, inexplicable pain and fatigue set in. It often was difficult for him to confront the day, to get out the door, to make it to class, to raise his hand. Many didn't believe him, but I knew his pain was real. And together we sought out specialists, trying to figure out what was wrong, developing a deep emotional connection. We were joined at the hip. As Bradley was up on his psychology lingo, he liked to refer to us as codependents. We saw therapists, psychiatrists, neurologists, endocrinologists, immunologists, allergists, along with acupuncturists and related Eastern medicine specialists. Although there's evidence that chronic pain is associated with mental disorders and substance abuse, the connection in terms of cause and effect is often unclear. In Bradley's case, the consensus was that he had depression and anxiety. Simple labels, which can be difficult to treat. When someone falls, an X-ray shows the break and a doctor uses a cast for healing, something concrete we can see and for which we all immediately seek medical care. Someone hits a mental wall and can't get out of bed, it's often hard to know whether it's just a bad day or something that won't resolve on its own and needs professional treatment. And unlike a physical illness, nearly 60% of us don't receive any mental health treatment or counseling. Confirming a diagnosis can take months, even years, and still be elusive. This was a terrible time for Bradley. But despite his struggles, he kept up his regimen of therapy, mindfulness, and meds. With his friends and school community by his side, we hoped he would finish high school. And we were so thrilled when he made it to graduation, and then off to USC to study theater. We were hopeful that his love of performing and this new experience would give him a fresh start. But with his mental health not well controlled, the transition to college was too much, and Bradley dropped out before the end of the semester. When he left, no one said goodbye and no one reached out. It was shocking that the university didn't follow up in any way to make sure he was okay. And this brings me to my fourth insight. Make sure to get the support you or your loved one needs when transitioning to college. One bright spot of the pandemic is that it has reduced the stigma of needing and getting mental health support. After Bradley's unsuccessful attempt at college, he agreed to try several mental health facilities and programs across the country. A neurologist diagnosed him with peripheral neuralgia, a nerve disorder, which could have explained his physical pain, but more meds were prescribed with more side effects. Chronic pain is hard to treat, so patients often seek care from multiple doctors. This leads to polypharmacy, the layering on of multiple medications, not always appropriately. Because of the complexity and lack of knowledge of mental illness, physicians often overuse the only tools available to them, medication. As Bradley was now 18, things became even more challenging. When he was a child, we were in charge, but now we had less influence, even though he still really needed us. It was difficult to be pushed away. We felt helpless. My fifth insight is to stay involved if your adult child is suffering with a mental health issue. You don't have to know all the details of the private therapy conversations, but be a part of the overall treatment plan. If they're taking prescription drugs, it's especially a good idea to watch over them. And if there are multiple doctors prescribing medications, make sure they are all talking to each other. When Bradley returned to Los Angeles, he moved to a sober living home. He wasn't an addict, but they offered services like daily mindfulness and behavioral therapy, and it seemed like a supportive and welcoming community. The pain from mental health issues often leads people to self-medicate in the form of alcohol, illegal drugs, prescription meds, or supplements. It can offer short-term relief, but over time it leads to addiction, worsened mood disorders, and increased health problems. Bradley's attempt to self-soothe included an obsessive search for the perfect cocktail of meds. His multiple doctors, who were not talking to each other, agreed to his request for more drugs, further contributing to the polypharmacy phenomenon. Bradley drank lots of Red Bull, trying to fight his overwhelming fatigue. He found supplements online from questionable sources, including many from Russia that were unregulated and potentially dangerous. Glenn and I intercepted and threw away packages sent to our home, but we couldn't control the things sent directly to where Bradley was living. Bradley's misguided attempts to save himself were self-destructive. Bradley was clearly over-medicated. Why didn't his psychiatrist see that? He eventually agreed to see a new doctor who was going to help him reduce his meds. His life coach encouraged him to take on new activities, a class, a community college in which he was excelling, volunteering at a homeless shelter, and trying to engage with others his age. We were so optimistic, proud of how hard he was trying. One night, Bradley complained of not feeling well, was offered his usual cocktail of meds, some Advil, and sent to bed. He grabbed a Red Bull before heading up. No one bothered to check on him. And just like that, Bradley was gone. One of 67,000 that died from some kind of drug overdose or reaction in 2017. That number jumps to over 100,000 in 2021. What happened to my beautiful Bradley? Coroner's report said he died of psychiatric drug interactions. Medication was critical to Bradley's treatment. Every drug found in his system had been prescribed to him. So what went wrong? It's hard to know where to place the blame. Was it the doctors who prescribed too many meds, inadequate oversight, lack of collaboration between doctors, the interaction of the meds in his body, or his desperate need to self-soothe, which led to overdose? Just one more tragic and avoidable death due to mental illness. And Bradley had loving parents and siblings with all eyes focused on him. He had access to the best healthcare available. Not everyone is so lucky. And yet Despite his privilege, we still couldn't save him. Bradley had a rich and meaningful life despite his challenges. And this brings me to my sixth and final insight. Remember, your illness does not define you. Your strength and courage does. It is important to remember this as you work towards healing. Like these celebrities who achieved tremendous success despite their mental health challenges. In the year after we lost Bradley, there were 9 student deaths on campus. To address this problem, to honor the memory of our son, and to be that rallying cry for change that is so important to me, Glenn and I established the Bradley Sonnenburg Wellness Initiative at USC, which offers wellness programming along with a full-time therapist. College students are young enough to benefit from such interventions. Programs like this are already being replicated on college campuses across the country. Feedback has been phenomenal. The initiative just launched a wellness curriculum based on Jewish wisdom and modern psychology to help students live a balanced and fulfilling life amidst its difficult challenges. Working in collaboration with Hillel International, this program will be shared with Hillels everywhere, as well as in underserved communities. When Bradley died, it was my children, my sister, and a few of my closest friends who formed a loving cocoon around me, refusing to let me give up. Then our larger community arrived with the proverbial cakes and casseroles. Over time, it was my grief group who saved me, understanding the complexities of loss. Whether you have lost someone or are still in the fight against mental illness, finding a community to talk to is life-changing. We couldn't save Bradley, but I came to learn that I could help others by sharing his story and bringing awareness to this critical issue as I am today. In addition, my podcast, Getting Thru, where I interview young adults with stories of how they get through mental health challenges, is reaching more listeners every day. People are searching for strategies and stories to help them navigate the complex world of mental health. I hope you'll tune in. My message and that of the Getting Thru podcast is simple. As long as you or your loved one are still alive, there is hope. In conjunction with the podcast, I'm doing a weekly Instagram live series with people in the mental health community, professionals, gurus, program founders, or just simply someone struggling, sharing a story so others feel less alone. Follow Getting Thru podcast on Instagram and join our community as a listener or even as a guest. Despite the failures we personally face, there are reasons to be hopeful. Telemedicine and app-based services have made mental health services more accessible. And now mental health services are being offered at CVS. Psychedelic drugs are showing great promise. Bradley was a big believer in the potential. Deep brain stimulation and electric shock therapy are much more utilized as treatment options. In the Black communities, due to the historical importance of barbers, programs have developed training them to become mental health advocates, assisting clients through active listening, positive communication, validation, and stigma reduction, known as psychotherapy. Since the pandemic, the Boys and Girls Club of America has created a new resilience building program that is being offered at its numerous clubs in Los Angeles County with the hopes of replication across the country. Pet and animal therapy can also help. And the healing power of nature, another critical tool. There's now evidence that surf therapy decreases mental health issues, not just due to the physical activity involved, but the mindfulness that surfing requires. Mental health experts, not police, are serving as first responders for mental health emergencies, offering expertise with suicide attempts, substance abuse, and serious mental illness in several cities. There's lots of support available. 2 respected organizations are the National Alliance on Mental Illness and Mental Health America. And now you folks have a mental health resources right at your own synagogue. California moved the needle with its new landmark legislation requiring insurers to cover medically necessary mental health and addiction treatment. Hopefully, this will serve as a national model for reform. And new legislation is in the works in California to regulate care at sober living homes and to require that all students receive age-appropriate mental health education. If we can start educating kids from a young age, we can bring these issues out of the shadows. The recently published book, Healing: Our Path from Mental Illness to Mental Health, by leading neuroscientist and former head of the National Institute of Mental Health, explores all that is broken in the mental health care system, offering his vision for a better path to mental health. I urge you to talk about mental illness, to stop the stigma, support a struggling friend, work for access to treatment, be an advocate. Change is possible. Change is part of Bradley's legacy. My hope is that you will leave here today with a better understanding of and compassion for mental illness. Bradley has inspired me to join the fight to turn tragedy into transformation, loss into legacy. I am committed to advocate on behalf of a system that needs improvement. He would have been proud and humbled to know he is serving as a catalyst for change. Thank you.
Andrea, thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
sharing your story. And I'm very moved, and just want to acknowledge the bravery, the courage that it must take for you to share your story again and again and again. Your words, your transformation, the journey from tragedy to be transformed into hopefulness and action, with the urgency that others learn from your experience. Every time you tell the story, it must erupt again and again. And so again, I'm very grateful to you, and on behalf of everyone, for your courage and for your openness and sharing with us, and our condolences.
Thank you.
Please, I'm seeing in our chat that there are not yet any questions from our various platforms. So please, everyone, recover a moment and formulate some questions. We have this amazing opportunity to ask questions of Andrea about her personal experience, about her amazing advocacy work, about her son, about your family. So while you're doing that, I do have a few questions, if I might launch and get things started. So how do you help someone who doesn't realize? Your son was very aware that he was struggling. How do you help someone that maybe isn't as insightful about their own pain, their own suffering, their own struggles, who doesn't consider that there's a problem or who refuses to get help? What would you recommend someone do?
That is a really difficult problem. And it always comes, the person has to acknowledge it themselves and has to want to get help themselves. It's sort of like you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But I think what's really, really important is to get the person to trust you. So if your loved one or your friend, your loved one, your family member trust you and know that you're not judging them, that you really, really support them, I think that's the way to make inroads. So you need to start by listening. You don't tell them what to do. You suggest things. You let them try to come to the realization themselves. But I think so much of it is about the person that's struggling, believing that you're not judging them and that you are on their side. And sometimes it takes time, you can't, it's not like an easy, you need to go to therapy. It doesn't work that way. but you really need to be supportive. You need to listen, and you can't give up. You know, you can't give up. You got to keep trying. And it's so much about trust. And like when that person trusts you, and that's the same thing with a therapist. Like when you go to a therapist, you know, the therapist works so hard to gain the client's trust. So it's the same thing with a friend or, you know, with a loved one. You want to know that you're trusted, that they trust you. And when they trust you, they'll listen to you.
Yeah, thank you. And I imagine that especially, you know, during adolescence, that could be a particularly difficult and trying task.
But the thing is that in adolescence, you have more control. So, you know, in adolescence, you can say you're going to the therapist, and you kind of can take them to the therapist. When they're 18, 19, 20,
Right.
that's when it gets harder. Because, you know, they're on their own. They have to give you permission to talk to their therapist, you know, so that's when it gets a little trickier.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. There is a question from a Zoomer, from Michael. Many of us have children and grandchildren on this call. At what age do you think a child can communicate about their own pain? What questions would you recommend asking children that could let us know they are having challenges?
A lot of it is like you see their behavior. So if you see things like extra, like I can, you know, speak from experience with my son, like extra sensitivities, you know, loud noises, the tag on his shirt, not really fitting in, tantrums. And the hard thing is that a lot of that's developmental. So, you know, and you know that, Carolyn, as a therapist yourself. So a lot of that's developmental, and that's kind of what I thought. I'm like, oh, and it's interesting because we actually went to a therapist when Bradley was 4. We didn't take him, we went ourselves, and we explained what was going on. And the therapist said to me, oh, he'll either get better or he won't. You know, and what he meant by that was that it could be just developmental, and it could be a more significant problem. So it's hard to ask kids questions. I think it's more about watching their behavior, you know, and as they get older, are they sleeping more than they used to sleep? Are their eating habits changing? Are they not participating in the same activities that they used to participate in? Are they not wanting to do certain things because it makes, you know, it gives them anxiety? Are they irritable? You know, those are the kind of things that I look for. Are they sleeping too much? Are they not sleeping? You know, do they isolate? You know, do they close them? And that's a hard thing to judge because teens do that. That's part of their separation, you know, and they want to be on their own. But the main thing is to watch for changes in that particular child. So if you know what those child's patterns are and you see changes in those patterns, that's what to look for.
Yeah, thank you. I would also this is something that you shared in your presentation as well, that that so much of this has to the observations, the awareness that we have as parents, grandparents, has to do with, happens within the context of the relationship. So, right, if we know our child's baseline, our baseline behavior, and we're noticing changes, or if there's, if we have been paying attention to those avenues of communication, then and building that trust along the way, then changes in that are going to also be red flags. Or, again, even if child who may not be verbally able to communicate that something's wrong, because they're within the context of the relationship, there's communication. That child can let you know in his way.
Exactly. And I also think it's really important for parents to seek out therapy themselves. If you're having difficulties with a child, we don't realize, there's no blame on us parents. But sometimes there are things that we do that might exacerbate problems at a certain, if you have an anxious child and you're anxious, your anxiety can bring on their anxiety, so if you go to therapy yourself and kind of learn about yourself and what your triggers are and how to know that, like, okay, when my child gets really agitated, maybe I need to take a time out, so I can calm myself down. So I really, really highly recommend, it's not like you have to be in therapy for years, but, I recommend that as a parent, particularly if you have a difficult child, that you go to therapy and that you learn about ways to deal with the child so that you can have, the healthiest relationship possible.
Thank you. Yeah, putting your proverbial oxygen mask on first as well, right? I mean,
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Human beings as well. So
exactly. And you learn the things to say, how to talk to your kids. I mean, I think it's a great idea for anyone, any parent, but in particular, if you have a child that has particular sensibilities and sensitivities, I think it's a great way to help with parenting.
Agreed. Thank you. There is another question. This is a message from Michal. She writes, "I'm so very sad and sorry for your loss. Tremendous courage all around. My worry is the school system isn't built for individuals and their welfare. Teachers becoming alert, schools and their standing, rather than the students' interests. Buddy systems that could be a front line of awareness. How can we work with schools to raise more awareness?"
I think that's such an important point, and I agree wholeheartedly. I say that the system failed my son many times, and one of the failures was that there was no school for him. That they when he was in elementary school. Now that's why he ended up having to go to a therapeutic boarding school. There was no school in Los Angeles that could sort of satisfy his needs. So something that I think that's really important, and what I alluded to, that there's been money allocated in the budget for mental health curriculum, and we need a mental health curriculum. We're working on a mental health curriculum, or we have a mental health curriculum for college age students, and I think that's incredible, and I'm thrilled about it. But we need mental health curriculum for high school students and for elementary school age students, so that kids learn how to talk about it, know what it is, recognize it, see it in others, normalize it. So, there's no stigma, and they know to say, "Mommy, I feel really sad, and I don't know, and I don't know why, or I'm really angry." So I think a great way to start it is to work on curriculum in elementary schools, and that's something I'm really passionate about, and it's on my plate of things to do. I just have a lot of things on my plate, so but it's definitely on my plate of things to do. Like I said, I'm working on this college curriculum, and once we get that beta tested and ready to be sent around to colleges, then I'm moving to elementary, not high school, because I feel like they have counselors and they have we'll get to that, but then I'm shifting to elementary because I think it's really, really important. And I think you can also work with your parents association. Maybe you bring in speakers to your parents association about mental health and about ways that we can help our young people. I really think if we get to these kids young, it'll be so much easier for them as they get older, and the issues get bigger as the kids get older. So if they learn and have tools from when they're young, I think they can tackle these problems much better when they're older. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that, your concern, and I hope you maybe bring that back to your parents association, your concerns.
Thank you. Let's see. We build the event tonight as mental health in the Jewish community. I'm wondering if you could speak for a moment to the Jewish communal response to mental illness, to mental health, and what we can be doing as a community to better serve our families who are facing these challenges.
I love that. I love that. I love that. Well, first of all, I think we're doing, I'm really happy to see, for example, like that the Jewish Federation has really committed itself to mental health. And they're funding, I'm actually sitting on a committee reading grants where they're providing funding to various Jewish organizations around the city, providing mental health programs. So the Jewish community is really doing its best to try to address this pressing need by providing, redirecting funding to organizations to provide mental health care services for teens, for parents, for young adults, whoever in the community. And there's some great programs that are being either imagined or already in existence and just, are going to continue on when they get the funding that they need. So I think that's one thing that's really incredible that we're doing on a communal level. I also think that what's really, really important is a sense of community and a sense of acceptance and a sense of belonging and a sense of support. So doing like what you guys are doing, like having speakers tell their story so that audiences, so that the community can say like, wow, I have experienced something like that. I'm not alone. I'm not the only one. And by hearing, and that's my hope, and that's why I do what I do, is that I hope that I can share what we've gone through. God forbid someone, should have the same situation that we have. But there are aspects of it that so many people can relate to. Even if you have a perfectly balanced, normal child, there still are phases in their life where they didn't get invited to the prom, or they didn't, they're not doing well in school, or, there are challenges. And so to hear that other people are going through difficulties and have challenges, it just gives us comfort. That's why support groups are so successful. And so that's the other thing is like, I really am a strong believer in support groups. And I think I heard you saying at the beginning that your community, you offer support groups. I cannot recommend them enough. I think they're incredible. That it saved my life. My grief group saved my life. So to be in an organization, be a part of a community where people have gone through what you've gone through, and you can say, oh, it's so hard when, and they say, oh, I know. That's exactly that exactly happened to me. It's not a coincidence that they offer, that support groups are around. So I really, really recommend that. So I think a sense of community and being open and sharing, because then we reduce the stigma and we normalize mental health. And I think we're going to get to the point where mental health is the same as physical health. It's just a different part of the body. It's the brain versus the kidney or the arm or the leg, and just like you go to the doctor for when you've got a broken leg, you have mental health issues, you go to the doctor. And like I was saying, 60% of us don't go to the doctor. 60% of us do not stay away from the doctor when we have a physical problem. So, we continue this sense of community. We talk about it, we normalize it. And I think, I've seen a lot of celebrities getting sort of on the bandwagon about mental health. And I think that's great. But I think it's actually more important that regular people, because we relate to regular people, and because we're regular people, and, we can't really relate to celebrities. So I think it's really important that we be a community and that we support each other. I mean, I learned so much once I opened up. Like I didn't even know about NAMI, and NAMI is incredible. They have all sorts of support groups, and they offer classes, and they have peers that, they have peer-to-peer counseling, and they have a Stop the Stigma campaign where peers are talking all over college, all over high schools, all over the place. I mean, it's incredible stuff out there that I didn't know about until I, kind of was honest with what I was struggling with. So that's what I recommend.
Great, thank you. We have a few more minutes. If anyone has an additional question for Andrea, please, now is your time to type in into the chat, and I will feed her the question. In the meantime, this is such an important topic. It's a life and death topic.
Mhm.
And I so hope that that those here tonight will tell their friends, and then they'll tell their friends, so that as a community we can, as you're saying, normalize mental health as we do physical health, and that those of us who have struggles, and we all will have struggles. No one gets through life without struggles at one point or another. That we don't feel shame, and we get the help that we need, and we recognize that we're all human beings, and there's help, and that we can be there for each other. Let's see, there is one more comment. Thank you so much for all you do. I love the podcast and appreciate your work so much. I have young adults who struggle, and I am on this journey. Thank you.
And I wanted to tell you also that I'm happy to have you share my email address. I'm available. Please feel free to reach out. To the extent that I can help anyone, I'm happy to do that. And I talk to people and email people all the time. So feel free to reach out.
Thank you. So I think maybe what we'll do, if you can say your email. We have Judy is on our end typing into the chat for everyone.
Sure.
It's
Sonnenburg, just like my name, SONNENBERGAL, Sonnenburg al@gmail.com.
Perfect. Thank you. Final words, your parting words for us tonight, and then I'm going to turn it over to Michael to say, to wrap up and say good night from the men's club side of things. You gave great. We're very grateful. Thank you so much.
It's my absolute pleasure. I'm thrilled to have this platform. It means a lot to me to speak to the Jewish community. That's very near and dear to my heart. Alongside my mental health advocacy is my Jewish community advocacy as well. So bringing those two together is really incredible for me. So I thank you for that platform. As I mentioned earlier, the work that you guys are doing at your synagogue is incredible and life-changing. And I'm so thrilled to be able to see the work that you're doing. And I really, my parting words is I encourage your temple community to make use of those amazing services that are available. Join those support groups, reach out to Carolyn, and don't suffer in silence.
There's no reason to suffer in silence.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea. Michael, did you want to say a few words? Thank you to Andrea.
I really do. I'm very touched, by this discussion tonight. In addition, I think it's our Jewish teaching that if you save one life, you save the world.
Exactly.
So
right.
I think in memory of Bradley, he is going to save, a life, and plural, and many lives, and I think this is fantastic, because the folks listening tonight, the folks asking questions, really get the impact that can be made, and I think when I look at folks, by the way, who come each Shabbat, everybody comes for a different reason. And when you look into their eyes, you can see, this person is elated and this person may not be elated, and there's a challenge. So I think it helps everybody identify. But, both Andrea and Carolyn, I would love to, have the ability to refer folks out to you, and, have them have a safe space to be counseled. I think it's wonderful, Carolyn, that yourself and Rabbi Guzik at Sinai Temple have championed the center, and, being able to speak with someone like Andrea, and just what she went through, but to Bradley's memory of a beautiful blessing for everyone that he's touched. And when I looked at his pictures, you could see, or at least I felt I could see into his soul. And, it was very touching to see that. So I hope the men's club can refer folks, that may be listening to this recording, afterwards, and open up dialogue, and as I say, help those folks. So I think it's great, what you're both doing, and so glad that the community gets to learn from this here, as I did. So Yasher Koach.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome.
Take care.
Thank you, Michael.
Yeah.
Thank you, Andrea.
It's my
Have a
pleasure.
lovely evening.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Bye,
Good night,
everyone.
everybody.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.